The scream that tore through the luxury apartment in Victoria Island, Lagos, was one Chidera Okafor would never forget. She clutched her swollen belly with one hand, while her other arm hung useless, skin peeling away in sheets where the boiling water had struck. Her husband Chukwudi stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, the empty kettle still trembling in his grip, his eyes wide with horror at what he'd just done. What would you do if you walked in on this? Hit like and subscribe if you've been betrayed, and comment below where you're watching from. Chukwudi! Chidera's voice cracked as she stumbled backward, her 7-month pregnancy making her movements awkward. You actually did it. She told you to hurt me, and you did it. This wasn't supposed to be her life. 3 years ago, Chidera had married Chukwudi Okafor, the ambitious finance director at Sterling Bank's headquarters. Everyone called them Lagos's power couple. She was a successful fashion designer with her boutique in Lekki, and he drove a Range Rover Sport. They lived in a 3-bedroom apartment that overlooked the Lagos Lagoon. Their wedding at the Civic Center had been featured in Billionaire. Her mother had cried tears of joy, saying Chidera had married well. But 6 months ago, everything changed when Adais entered their lives. Adais Nwosu, the new marketing executive at Chukwudi's bank, with her honey-colored complexion and Brazilian weave that cascaded down her back. Chidera had noticed the late-night calls first, then the expensive perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his shirts. She'd confronted him twice. He denied everything twice. Then last week, she'd found the text messages. Baby, you need to handle that pregnancy situation. She's making you soft. Real men don't let their wives control them. Prove you love me. The messages from Adais had been explicit, manipulative, challenging Chukwudi's manhood at every turn. The final message had come yesterday. If you really love me, show her who's boss. Make her understand she means nothing. Do something that proves I'm your priority now. And now, standing in their kitchen with her arm burning and blistering, Chidera understood the depth of the betrayal. This wasn't just infidelity in marriage. This was something darker, more twisted. Her cheating spouse had become someone capable of violence, transformed by emotional manipulation into a weapon aimed at his own pregnant wife. She didn't mean, I didn't think. Chukwudi's voice trailed off, his eyes darting between Chidera's injuries and his phone buzzing on the counter. Even now, Adais was calling him. Don't you dare answer that, Chidera hissed through tears of pain and rage. The domestic betrayal was complete. Her fairy tale had become a nightmare, and her husband was choosing his mistress over his wife and unborn child. Chukwudi's hand moved toward the phone anyway. That single gesture told Chidera everything she needed to know. She turned and ran, or rather, waddled as fast as her pregnant body would allow, grabbing her car keys from the entrance table. Behind her, she heard Chukwudi answer the call with, Baby, I did what you asked. The words stabbed deeper than any physical wound. Chidera made it to her Mercedes in the parking garage, her vision blurring from pain and shock. Her arm throbbed, the skin angry and weeping. She needed a hospital. She needed the police. She needed her mother. But first, she needed evidence. With shaking hands, she pulled out her phone and took photos of her injuries. Then she did something Chukwudi would never expect from his quiet, submissive wife. She opened her banking app and transferred 5 million naira from their joint account to her personal savings. It was her money anyway, earned from her boutique. If she was going to war, she needed ammunition. As she drove toward Reddington Hospital in tears, her phone buzzed. Not Chukwudi, her best friend Ngozi. Chi, I saw something. I'm at Radisson Blue. Chukwudi is here. With her. Chidera's blood ran cold. What? They're checking into a room. Chi, he's laughing. He's celebrating something. 30 minutes. That's all it had taken. 30 minutes since he'd scalded his pregnant wife, and Chukwudi was already meeting Adais at a hotel, probably telling her how he'd proven his love. The revenge story forming in Chidera's mind took shape instantly. They thought she was weak. They thought pregnancy made her powerless. They were about to learn how wrong they were. At the hospital, while nurses treated her second-degree burns, Chidera made calls. First to her uncle, a senior partner at a law firm, then to her cousin who worked at the Guardian newspaper. Finally to someone Chukwudi had forgotten about entirely. His boss's wife, Auntie Folik, whom Chidera had befriended at a corporate wives' luncheon. Auntie Folik's husband, the bank's managing director, had strict rules about workplace affairs, especially those involving harassment or manipulation. Auntie Folak, Chidera said calmly despite her tears, I need to tell you about some African marriage drama happening at Sterling Bank. It involves domestic violence, infidelity, and one of your husband's directors. By midnight, Chidera had filed a police report, complete with photos. By morning, she would own this narrative. They wanted to destroy her. She would burn their world down first. But as she lay in the hospital bed, feeling her baby kick against her belly, she received a message from an unknown number. You think you're smart? Chukwudi told me everything you're planning. You're about to lose more than just your marriage. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think happens next? Comment below. The morning sun cast long shadows through the hospital window as Chidera stared at the threatening text message. Her bandaged arm throbbed with each heartbeat, a constant reminder of yesterday's horror. But it wasn't the physical pain keeping her awake. It was the realization that Adadiz knew she'd gone to the police. Her mother, Mama Nkechi, arrived at dawn, her wrapper tied hastily around her waist, her face etched with worry and rage. The moment she saw her daughter's injuries, she collapsed into the visitor's chair and wept. My daughter, what kind of man have you married? What demon possessed that boy? Chidera had always been her mother's pride. The first in their family to earn a university degree from the University of Lagos, she'd built her fashion business from nothing. Her boutique, Chichi Couture, dressed Lagos's elite women, from politicians' wives to Nollywood actresses. She'd done everything right, married a man from a good family, attended church every Sunday at Daystar Christian Center, respected her in-laws, and still she'd ended up here, burned, betrayed, fighting for her dignity and her unborn child's future. Mama, I need you to do something for me, Chidera said, her voice steadier than she felt. Go to the house, pack all my important documents, my business papers, my laptop, everything. Don't let Chukwudi know you're taking anything. But Mama Nkechi shook her head. I already went, my daughter. At 5 this morning. Your father and your brothers went with me. And? Her mother's face hardened. The locks were changed. Chukwudi had security guards there, men in black uniforms. They said you're not allowed back in your own home. They had papers, some kind of restraining order. The audacity, the sheer calculated cruelty of it took Chidera's breath away. While she'd been in the hospital having her burns treated, her cheating spouse had been planning his next move. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was a coordinated attack on her entire life. Her phone rang. Her lawyer uncle, Bar, Emeka Okolie. Chidera, we have a problem. Chukwudi filed his own police report last night. He's claiming you attacked him first. He says you burned yourself deliberately to frame him. He has a witness. Let me guess, Adaizi. How did you know? Chidera laughed bitterly. The emotional manipulation had evolved into something more sinister. They weren't just having an affair. They were orchestrating a complete character assassination. In Nigeria, where society often blamed women for their marriages falling apart, where whispers and rumors could destroy a woman's reputation faster than any court case, this strategy was devastatingly effective. Uncle Emeka, what are my chances? The lawyer's pause told her everything. Chi, without witnesses to the actual attack, this becomes, he said, she said. And Chukwudi is well connected. His family knows people. Already I'm hearing things. They're saying you're mentally unstable from the pregnancy. They're saying you have a history of jealous rages. Public disgrace, and that's what they were engineering. Not just divorce, but complete social destruction. Chidera could see the playbook clearly now. Adaiz would emerge as the victim, the other woman who'd been falsely accused. Chukwudi would be the concerned husband trying to protect himself from his unstable wife. And Chidera? She'd be labeled crazy, vindictive, a woman who'd burned herself for attention. Her best friend Ngozi burst into the hospital room, her face flushed from running. Chi, Twitter is going crazy. Someone leaked the story, but they're saying you attacked Chukwudi. There are hashtags around, so justice for Chukwudi is trending. They're calling you a gold digger trying to trap him with a pregnancy that might not even be his. The room spun. Chidera gripped the bed rails, fighting nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. This was warfare at its most modern and brutal. Social media had become their weapon, turning public opinion against her before she could even tell her side. "Who leaked it?" Chidera demanded. "I'm trying to find out." "But the tweets are coordinated. Same language, same talking points. Someone is paying for this campaign." Of course they were. Adiz worked in marketing. She understood narrative control, how to manipulate public perception. This wasn't just a revenge story anymore. This was a masterclass in destroying someone's reputation while looking like the victim. Chidera's phone exploded with notifications, friends sending concerned messages, clients from her boutique asking if the allegations were true, her sister calling from Abuja, crying, saying their father had seen the trending hashtag and was threatening to disown Chidera for bringing shame to the family. Everything was unraveling, exactly as Adiz and Chukwudi had planned. But then Mama Nkechi did something unexpected. She pulled out her own phone, opened her camera, and positioned herself beside Chidera's hospital bed. "My daughter, let them see the truth. Let the whole world see what that devil did to my child." "Mama, what are you doing?" "Fighting back the only way we can now, with the truth." Mama Nkechi's hands trembled as she filmed, her voice cracking with emotion as she narrated what happened. She showed Chidera's bandaged arm, the medical reports, the police documentation. She spoke about domestic betrayal, about a mother's pain watching her pregnant daughter suffer. She named Chukwudi. She named Adiz. She named Sterling Bank. "If anything happens to my daughter or my grandchild," Mama Nkechi said directly to the camera, "the world will know who is responsible." They posted the video to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Within an hour, the narrative began to shift. Justice for Chidera started trending. Women across Lagos, across Nigeria, across Africa began sharing their own stories of domestic violence, infidelity in marriage, emotional manipulation by cheating spouses. But victory was short-lived. At 2 p.m., Chidera's doctor entered with news that stopped her heart. "Mrs. Okafor, I'm sorry. Your baby's heartbeat is becoming irregular. The stress, combined with your injuries, we need to monitor you very carefully. If things worsen, we may need to induce labor early." 7 months. Her baby was only 7 months along. If she gave birth now, her child would fight for survival in an incubator while she fought her battles in court and social media. The weight of it crushed her chest, making it hard to breathe. And then the final blow came via text from an unknown number. "Check your business account." With shaking hands, Chidera logged into Shishi Couture's banking portal. Her business account, the one with 3 years of profits, showed a balance of 0. Every naira gone. "Mama," she whispered, showing her mother the screen, "he stole my business. Everything I built. It's all gone." The co-parenting conflict she'd anticipated, the legal battle she'd prepared for, suddenly seemed naive. Chukwudi and Adiz weren't just trying to win. They were trying to annihilate her completely, leaving nothing behind but ruins. As hospital staff rushed in to check her vital signs, as her mother screamed for help, as her baby's heartbeat flickered on the monitor, Chidera made a decision. If they wanted war, she would give them war. But not the kind they expected. She had one card left to play, one secret she'd discovered weeks ago that would destroy them both. But playing it meant becoming someone she'd never wanted to be. It meant abandoning every moral code she'd lived by. The question was, had they pushed her far enough to actually do it? Comment your thoughts on the betrayal. What would you do in Chidera's situation? Like and share this with someone who loves drama. 3 days later, Chidera checked herself out of the hospital against medical advice. Her arm remained heavily bandaged, her baby's heartbeat had stabilized but remained concerning, and her doctor warned that stress could trigger premature labor. None of that mattered anymore. She had work to do. The rented apartment in Ikea was small, nothing like the luxury she left behind. But it was hers. Ngozi had arranged it, paid 3 months up front from her own pocket. "This is your war room," her best friend had declared. "Now let's destroy them." Chidera stood at the window overlooking Lagos's chaotic traffic, her laptop open on the small dining table behind her. On the screen were documents she'd been collecting for 6 weeks, ever since she'd first suspected Chukwudi's infidelity. She hadn't known what she'd do with the information then. Now she knew exactly. Are you absolutely sure about this? Her lawyer uncle sat across from her, reading through the papers with widening eyes. Chi, if you release this information, there's no going back. Chukwudi will be arrested. Adaz will lose everything. Sterling Bank will be forced to respond publicly. I'm sure. What Chidera had discovered would shake Lagos's financial district to its core. Chukwudi hadn't just been having an affair with Adai's. They'd been embezzling funds from Sterling Bank together, using fake vendor accounts and manipulated contracts. Over 18 months, they'd stolen 47 million naira. The money was sitting in offshore accounts, waiting to fund their planned escape to South Africa once Chukwudi could divorce Chidera. But there was more, much more. Adazi wasn't even who she claimed to be. Her real name was Ada Okoli, and she had a husband. A husband currently serving in the Nigerian Navy, deployed on anti-piracy operations in the Gulf of Guinea. Commander Olumide Okoli had no idea his wife of 5 years was in Lagos, calling herself Adezinwosu and seducing married men. The layers of deception were stunning. The domestic betrayal Chidera had suffered was just one piece of a much larger web of lies and theft. How did you even find all this? Uncle Emeka asked, still scrolling through the evidence. Remember when Chukwudi gave me access to his laptop for our joint tax filing last year? I installed monitoring software. I know every website he visited, every document he opened, every password he used. I've been watching everything for months. I just didn't know what I was looking at until I started digging deeper. It sounded calculating when she said it aloud, but Chidera had learned something crucial about survival in the past week. Nice women finished last. Trusting women got burned. Literally, if she wanted to protect herself and her unborn child, she had to be smarter and more ruthless than her enemies. Her phone buzzed, a message from a blocked number. I know where you're staying, your little apartment in Ikeja. Did you really think you could hide from us? Chidera's blood chilled. She showed the message to Uncle Emeka, who immediately stood and locked the apartment door. They're tracking you somehow. Your phone maybe, or they have someone following you. Let them watch, Chidera said, though her voice trembled. Let them think they're winning. That afternoon, she made a series of calls. First to Commander Olumide Okoli's commanding officer at the naval base, leaving a message that required urgent callback regarding his wife's activities in Lagos. Then to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Nigeria's anti-corruption agency, submitting an anonymous tip about financial irregularities at Sterling Bank involving director-level employees. Finally, the most important call, to Bella Naija, Linda Ikeji's blog, and the Punch newspaper. I have a story about infidelity, embezzlement, and identity fraud involving Sterling Bank executives. Are you interested? They were very interested. The African marriage drama, combined with financial crimes and military implications, was exactly the kind of explosive story that would dominate headlines for weeks. But timing was everything. Chidera couldn't release the information until every piece was in place, until she had protected herself legally and financially, because once this bomb dropped, the retaliation would be fierce. Uncle Emeka worked with her through the evening, filing papers to secure her business assets, establishing a separate legal entity for Chichi Couture that Chukwudi couldn't touch, and preparing lawsuits for the stolen funds. They also filed for emergency divorce proceedings on grounds of domestic violence, with additional claims for emotional distress, infidelity, and financial abuse. At 10 p.m., Ngozi arrived with news. I found something about Adazi's past. She's done this before. In Port Harcourt 3 years ago. Same pattern. Wealthy married man, affair, manipulation, theft. But that time, she disappeared before anyone could catch her. She's a professional. This is what she does. A predator. That's what Adai's was. And Chukwudi had been too blind, too arrogant, too controlled by his ego and desires to see it. The emotional manipulation had worked perfectly because Adai's understood how to weaponize male pride and marital dissatisfaction. How many other women has she destroyed? Chidera wondered aloud. How many other marriages? At least 4 that I could document, Ngozi replied. But I'm sure there are more. She's smart about covering her tracks. New name each time. New story. She probably would have disappeared after draining Chukwudi too, leaving him holding the bag for the embezzlement. The picture crystallized. Adesi had never loved Chukwudi. He wasn't special. He was just another mark in her long line of victims. The irony was savage. Chukwudi had destroyed his marriage, assaulted his pregnant wife, and ruined his reputation for a woman who'd been planning to betray him all along. Almost, Chidera felt sorry for him. Almost. Her phone rang at midnight. Unknown number. Against Uncle Emeka's advice, she answered. Chidere. Adaizi's voice was smooth, confident, mocking. I hear you've been busy, making calls, filing papers, gathering evidence. It's impressive, really. You're smarter than Chukwudi said. What do you want? To give you a chance to walk away, drop everything, divorce quietly, take some money, leave Lagos, start over somewhere else. Because if you don't, I promise you, your baby will never know their mother. Accidents happen all the time in Lagos. Car accidents, building collapses, random violence. This city is so dangerous. The threat was clear, direct, terrifying. But beneath Adasi's confidence, Chidera heard something else. Desperation. Fear. Adasi knew Chidera had something. She just didn't know what or how damaging it might be. Did you threaten me? Chidera asked calmly. Did you just threaten my unborn child? I'm offering you survival. That's not a threat. That's mercy. Chidera smiled. Thank you, Adasi. Or should I call you Ada? Ada Okoli? Does your husband know you're in Lagos? Does he know about your other names? Your other victims? Silence. Beautiful, complete silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. That's what I thought, Chidera continued. Now let me tell you what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, the EFCC will receive evidence of 47 million naira in embezzlement. By afternoon, Commander Okoli will know exactly what his wife has been doing. By evening, every newspaper and blog in Nigeria will be running the full story. And by next week, both you and Chukwudi will be in prison. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your offshore account, the one in South Africa. The balance might surprise you. Another pause. What did you do? I froze it. Turns out when you report money laundering to the right authorities, they act quickly. That 47 million? The government has it now. You and Chukwudi get nothing. Chidera heard something crash in the background of Adaizi's call. A scream of rage. Then the line went dead. Uncle Emeka stared at her with a mixture of pride and concern. Chi, you just declared war. They will come for you now with everything they have. I know. That's why we're moving. Tonight. Right now. They had 15 minutes to pack before Ngozi pulled up outside with two of Chidera's brothers. They drove to a hotel in Lekki, booked under a false name, and Chidera's brothers stood guard outside her room in rotating shifts. At 3 a.m., her phone pinged with a news alert. Sterling Bank had just issued a statement suspending 2 employees pending investigation into alleged financial irregularities. Chukwudi Okafor and Adaizi Nwosu were not named, but the positions listed matched theirs exactly. The machine was in motion. The revenge story was writing itself. And Chidera, lying in an uncomfortable hotel bed with her hand on her belly, felt her baby kick strong and defiant, as if cheering her on. But then a new message arrived, this time from Chukwudi. You've made a terrible mistake. My family will destroy you. My father knows the governor, the police commissioner, the chief justice. You think you're untouchable because you have some documents? You're nothing. You're nobody. And when I'm done with you, you'll wish you'd died in that kitchen. The public disgrace she'd feared was coming anyway, but now it would be a battle fought publicly, legally, socially, and personally. The co-parenting conflict she'd once dreaded was now the least of her concerns. She was fighting for her life, her freedom, and her child's future against opponents with power, connections, and nothing left to lose. As dawn broke over Lagos, Chidera realized this was only the beginning. The worst was still to come. Share this story if you've ever had to fight back against betrayal. What do you think Chidera should do next? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. The EFCC raid on Sterling Bank happened at 9 a.m. sharp, just as the morning rush of customers filled the banking hall in Victoria Island. Chidera watched from across the street, sitting in Ngozi's car with tinted windows, as armed officers in their signature windbreakers stormed through the entrance. Within minutes, Chukwudi and Adais were escorted out in handcuffs, their faces pale with shock and rage. The scene was surreal. Perfect. Just days ago, these two had been planning her destruction. Now they were center stage in Nigeria's latest financial scandal, their faces already circulating on Twitter and Instagram with hashtags like Wash Sterling Bank Scandal and Infidelity and Theft. "How does it feel?" Ngozi asked quietly. "Like I can breathe again," Chidera admitted, for the first time in months. But the victory was incomplete. Chukwudi's family had indeed begun their campaign against her, just as he'd threatened. His father, Chief Okafor, was a prominent Igbo businessman with deep pockets and deeper connections. By noon, Chidera's social media accounts were flooded with hate messages. Paid trolls, probably. They called her everything from gold digger to murderer, claiming she'd orchestrated the entire scandal to steal Chukwudi's money and reputation. The narrative war was vicious. For every person defending Chidera, 3 attacked her. They questioned her injuries, suggested she'd burned herself, speculated that the baby wasn't even Chukwudi's. The emotional manipulation had moved from private to public, becoming a spectacle for all of Nigeria to judge. Traditional media was more balanced, but not by much. The Punch ran a piece titled "Marriage or Money: The Sterling Bank Love Triangle." Vanguard asked if pregnant women were being given too much power in divorce cases. Only The Guardian took a clear stance, publishing Chidera's full account alongside photos of her injuries and medical reports. 3 days after the arrest, Chidera returned to her boutique for the first time since the attack. The shop in Lekki Phase 1 looked exactly as she'd left it. Mannequins wearing her latest designs, fabric samples organized by color, her sewing machines lined up like soldiers. But something felt different. Wrong. Her assistant, Blessing, met her at the door with tears in her eyes. "Madam, I'm so sorry, but many customers have canceled their orders. They say they don't want to be associated with the scandal. Some of the big clients, the politicians' wives, they're worried about their reputations." The financial revenge Chidera had planned on Chukwudi was backfiring onto her own business. Domestic betrayal had economic consequences she hadn't fully anticipated. The African marriage drama wasn't just personal anymore. It was affecting her livelihood, her employees' livelihoods, and her ability to support herself after divorce. "How many cancellations?" Chidera asked. "About 60% of our outstanding orders. That's over 8 million naira in lost revenue." The number hit like a physical blow. 8 million. Gone because she dared to fight back, because she'd refused to be silenced, because she'd chosen justice over quiet suffering. But Chidera hadn't survived this long to give up now. "Blessing, call every fashion blogger we know. Call the lifestyle influencers who've worn our designs. I want them to understand something. Supporting me isn't scandal, it's standing against domestic violence. Any influencer who publicly backs us gets a free custom piece for their next event." It was a gamble. Influencer marketing could reshape public perception, but only if she could find people brave enough to stake their own reputations on hers. In a society where appearances mattered more than truth, where social capital was everything, asking people to choose sides was asking for loyalty most wouldn't give. That afternoon brought a breakthrough. Amara Okoli, a popular Nollywood actress with 5 million Instagram followers, posted a photo of herself in one of Chidera's dresses with a caption that set social media ablaze. "This is Chichi Couture, made by a woman who survived her husband's betrayal and assault. If you think standing by her makes me controversial, unfollow me now. I stand with survivors, always. Trust her team Chidera, Pershachi, Chichi Couture." Within hours, 3 other celebrities followed suit. The narrative began shifting again. Women across Nigeria started sharing their own stories of infidelity in marriage, cheating spouses, and the courage it took to leave. Chichi Couture became a symbol of resistance against domestic abuse and the betrayal that often preceded it. But Chief Okafor wasn't finished. That evening, Chidera received a court summons. Chukwudi's family was suing her for defamation, demanding 50 million naira in damages. They claimed she destroyed their family name, that her false accusations had caused irreparable harm to their social standing and business interests. The legal battle was expanding beyond criminal charges against Chukwudi. Now Chidera was fighting multiple fronts: the EFCC investigation, her divorce proceedings, custody arrangements for her unborn child, her countersuit for the stolen business funds, and now this defamation case. Uncle Amika was blunt about her chances. Chi, they're trying to drain you financially, force you to settle, drop the charges against Chukwudi, abandon your claims to marital property, maybe even give up custody in exchange for them withdrawing the defamation suit. And if I don't settle? This could drag on for years, cost millions in legal fees, and there's no guarantee you'll win everything. But Chidera had already decided. No settlements, no compromises. She would see this through to the end, whatever that end might be. Then came news that changed everything. Commander Olumide Okoli had arrived in Lagos, and he wanted to meet her. They met at a quiet restaurant in Ikoyi, far from the media chaos. Commander Okoli was a tall, imposing man in his late 30s, his military bearing evident in every movement. But his eyes were sad, haunted by betrayal that mirrored Chidera's own. "I want to thank you," he said once they'd sat down, "for exposing what my wife was doing. I've been deployed for 8 months. 8 months believing she was in Enugu helping her sick mother. Meanwhile, she was here, living a completely different life. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Are you?" He smiled without humor. "Or are you grateful someone else was hurt by her too?" The question was fair. Chidera considered it honestly. "Both, I think. I'm sorry for your pain. But yes, I'm grateful I'm not fighting alone anymore. That someone else sees what these people really are." Commander Okoli leaned forward. "I have information about Adazi's past, not just the Port Harcourt situation your friend found. More. Much more. I've been investigating since your lawyer contacted my commanding officer. I have names, locations, bank records. She's been running this scheme for 7 years. At least 15 men. Maybe more. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to help you destroy her. Completely. Not just prison time for the Sterling Bank theft. I want her exposed for everything she's ever done. Every marriage she's ruined. Every man she's manipulated. Every naira she's stolen." His voice was cold, controlled fury. "I want her name to become synonymous with betrayal, so that when she eventually gets out of prison, she'll have nothing and no one." It was the darkest offer of alliance Chidera had ever received. But looking at Commander Okoli, seeing her own pain reflected in his face, she understood. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about making sure Adaze could never hurt anyone else again. "What about Chukwudi?" Chidera asked. "Him too. They're partners, co-conspirators. They deserve the same fate." They spent 2 hours planning, combining their evidence, coordinating with Uncle Amika and the EFCC investigators. By the end, they had a case that would keep both Chukwudi and Adaze in prison for years, destroy their reputations permanently, and set legal precedents for future cases involving domestic betrayal combined with financial crimes. That night, Chidera lay in her hotel bed, feeling her baby's increasingly strong kicks. 7 months pregnant, fighting multiple court battles, running a damaged business, and orchestrating the total destruction of her former husband and his mistress. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd said "I do" at the Civic Center 3 years ago, but it was her life now, and she was winning. Her phone buzzed with a message from a private investigator she'd hired. "Found something. Call me immediately." When she called back, the investigator's voice was tight with urgency. "Mrs. Okafor, you need to know something about your husband's family, about why they're fighting so hard to protect him. The embezzlement at Sterling Bank? Chukwudi wasn't the mastermind. His father was." The room tilted. "What?" "Chief Okafor has been using his son's position to steal from Sterling Bank for 3 years. Chukwudi was just the front man. The real money, over 200 million naira, went to shell companies controlled by Chief Okafor. The 47 million was just what Chukwudi and Adaeze skimmed for themselves. 200 million. The magnitude was staggering. This wasn't a simple case of a husband and his mistress stealing company funds. This was a family enterprise, a generational crime, and Chidera had accidentally stumbled into exposing it all. "The EFCC knows?" she asked. "Not yet, but they will once I submit this report tomorrow. Mrs. Okafor, you need to understand. Chief Okafor isn't going to let this go quietly. A man doesn't steal 200 million naira without having powerful friends who will protect him. And now that you're threatening to expose him, you're not just fighting your ex-husband anymore. You're fighting people who can make you disappear. The co-parenting conflict she'd worried about seemed almost quaint now. Her cheating spouse was the least of her problems. She'd unknowingly declared war on one of Lagos's most connected families, and they had the resources and ruthlessness to fight back with everything they had. As she processed this information, another message arrived from an unknown number. Your baby will never take their first breath. I promise you that. Like, comment, and share. What would you do if you received that message? Hit subscribe for more interesting content. Shadera went into labor at 2 a.m. in her hotel room, 5 weeks early. The contractions hit like lightning, doubling her over with pain that had nothing to do with her healing burns. Ngozi, sleeping on the couch, woke to Chidera's screams and immediately called for an ambulance while Chidera's brothers, still on guard duty outside, burst through the door. The baby's coming too early, Chidera gasped between contractions. It's the stress. Everything. It's killing my baby. The ride to Reddington Hospital was a blur of pain and terror. All she could think about was the threatening message. Your baby will never take their first breath. Had they done something? Poisoned her food? Tampered with her medication? Or was this simply her body breaking under the weight of fighting battles on every front? At the hospital, Dr. Adeyemi, the obstetrician who'd been monitoring her pregnancy, took one look at Chidera's vitals and made the call. Emergency cesarean. Now, the baby's heart rate is dropping. No. It's too early, Chidera pleaded, even as nurses wheeled her toward surgery. 35 weeks. The lungs aren't ready. If we wait, you both die, Dr. Adeyemi said bluntly. I'm sorry, Chidera. We're out of time. The operating room lights were too bright. Chidera lay on the table, her body split open while doctors worked frantically. She couldn't see anything below the surgical drape, but she could hear everything. The beeping machines, the tense medical jargon, the sharp intake of breath that meant something had gone wrong. And then silence. The terrible, devastating silence where a baby's cry should have been. Why isn't she crying? Chidera's voice cracked. Why can't I hear my baby? The doctors rushed her newborn daughter to the corner of the room. More medical equipment, more urgent voices. Chidera tried to sit up, tried to see, but the anesthesia and surgical restraints held her down. Ngozi, who'd been allowed in the operating room, stood frozen by the door, tears streaming down her face. Please, Chidera begged, please tell me she's alive. Finally, mercifully, a weak cry pierced the air. Thin, struggling, but alive. Her daughter was alive. She's breathing, Dr. Adeyemi announced, but she needs the NICU immediately. Mrs. Okafor, your daughter is a fighter, but the next 72 hours are critical. They let Chidera see her baby for 30 seconds. 30 seconds to memorize a tiny face, fingers no bigger than matchsticks, and eyes that hadn't yet opened. 30 seconds before they rushed her daughter to the neonatal intensive care unit, hooking her to machines that would breathe for her, feed her, keep her alive. Chidera named her Chamaka. God is beautiful, because despite everything, despite the domestic betrayal and violence and chaos, this tiny struggling life was beautiful, worth fighting for, worth surviving for. But while Chidera recovered in her hospital room, unable to move, unable to protect herself, Chief Okafor made his move. At 6 a.m., police officers arrived at the hospital with an arrest warrant, not for Chukwudi, for Chidera. Mrs. Chidera Okafor, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, falsifying evidence, and defamation. You have the right to remain silent. The world tilted sideways. What? No, this is insane. I just had surgery. My baby is in the NICU. But the officers were insistent. They had paperwork signed by a judge whom Uncle Emeka later confirmed was a close friend of Chief Okafor's family. The warrant claimed Chidera had fabricated the embezzlement evidence, that she'd manipulated bank records to frame Chukwudi, and that her injuries were self-inflicted as part of an elaborate revenge scheme against her husband's innocent relationship with a coworker. The emotional manipulation had reached its peak. Chief Okafor was using his connections to flip the entire narrative. transforming Chidera from victim to villain in a legal system that too often favored wealthy, powerful men over women seeking justice. She cannot be moved, Dr. Adeyemi insisted, physically blocking the officers. She's had major surgery. Moving her now could cause hemorrhaging, infection, or worse. I will not allow it. The standoff lasted 2 hours. Hospital security, Uncle Emeka arriving with court papers, Mama Nkechi screaming at the officers, and Chidera lying in bed, drugged and bleeding and fighting to stay conscious while her premature daughter fought for life 3 floors above. Finally, a compromise. House arrest in the hospital room, with officers stationed outside. Chidera would remain hospitalized until medically cleared, then face immediate detention pending trial. The cheating spouse and his powerful family had found a way to imprison her without the burden of immediate proof. Over the next 3 days, while Chiamaka struggled in her incubator, Chidera watched her life disintegrate from a hospital bed. The defamation lawsuit gained traction. Sterling Bank, pressured by Chief Okafor's business partners, issued a statement suggesting the initial embezzlement investigation might have been based on unreliable evidence from a disgruntled spouse. News outlets that had supported her began hedging their coverage, adding qualifiers like alleged and disputed claims. Only one person stood unshakably in her corner: Commander Olamide Okoli. The military officer had resources Chidera lacked, including access to forensic accountants who couldn't be intimidated by Chief Okafor's money. He also had something else: moral authority. As a decorated naval officer whose wife had betrayed him, his voice carried weight in a country that respected military service. On day 4, while Chidera was finally allowed to hold Chiamaka for the first time, her daughter still tiny and fragile but stronger, Commander Okoli arrived with a team of EFCC investigators and military police. They went straight to Chief Okafor's mansion in Ikoyi. The raid was spectacular. It made every news channel in Nigeria. Military precision combined with EFCC's financial crimes expertise uncovered not just the 200 million naira stolen from Sterling Bank, but evidence of a much larger criminal enterprise. Chief Okafor had been operating a sophisticated fraud network for 15 years, using his various business interests to launder money, evade taxes, and defraud investors. Within hours, Chief Okafor was in custody. His political connections couldn't save him from military investigators working with international financial crime units. The evidence was overwhelming, indisputable, and completely demolished any leverage his family had over Chidera's case. But the sweetest moment came when Adaiz made a deal. Facing decades in prison, she agreed to testify against everyone: Chukwudi, Chief Okafor, and several other businessmen involved in the network. In her statement, she admitted everything: the manipulation, the embezzlement, and even her role in encouraging Chukwudi to hurt Chidera. She said pregnant women make men weak, Adaiz testified in her pretrial deposition, which was leaked to the press within hours. She said if Chukwudi really loved me, he'd prove it by putting me first. I suggested he do something dramatic to show his wife she didn't matter anymore. I didn't specify what, but when he told me what he'd done, I celebrated it. I thought it meant he was finally mine. The public disgrace was complete, not just for Adaiz and Chukwudi, but for everyone who'd defended them, everyone who'd attacked Chidera, everyone who'd participated in the character assassination of a domestic violence survivor. The hashtags changed overnight. Namor Justice for Chidera dominated Nigerian Twitter. Brands that had distanced themselves from Shichi Couture rushed to place orders. The politicians' wives who'd canceled came crawling back, apologizing, begging for appointments. The African marriage drama that had captivated the nation now had its villain and its hero clearly defined. 2 weeks after Chiamaka's birth, Chidera was cleared of all charges. The arrest warrant was declared invalid, issued under false pretenses by a corrupt judge who was now under investigation himself. Uncle Emeka filed a massive lawsuit against Chief Okafor's estate for malicious prosecution, harassment, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. But the legal victories, while sweet, weren't what mattered most to Chidera. What mattered was the moment she walked out of the hospital carrying her daughter, now strong enough to breathe on her own, feeding well, with color in her cheeks and curiosity in her eyes. Chukwudi had been transferred to Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison, awaiting trial on charges that would likely keep him locked up for 15 to 20 years. Adais was in the female section of the same prison, her beauty and manipulative charm useless in a cell. Chief Okafor, stripped of his titles and business empire, faced even longer sentences for his decades of crime. Chidera returned to her boutique in Lekki to find it transformed. Blessing had worked with Ngozi to completely rebrand Chichi Couture. Now it wasn't just a fashion house, it was a symbol. They'd created a foundation, the Chiamaka Foundation, supporting women escaping domestic violence, providing legal aid, business training, and emotional support. 50% of the boutique's profits would fund the foundation. "You turned betrayal into purpose," Ngozi said, watching Chidera survey the changes with Chiamaka asleep in her arms. "No," Chidera corrected. "I turned survival into power. There's a difference." The revenge story she'd lived through wasn't pretty. It wasn't simple. There were no clean heroes or villains, just complicated people making terrible choices with devastating consequences. But Chidera had learned something crucial through the fire. She was stronger than she'd ever known, smart enough to outmaneuver enemies with more resources, brave enough to fight even when fighting meant risking everything. 3 months later, at Chiamaka's christening at Daystar Christian Center, Chidera stood before a packed church and told her story. Not the sanitized version, not the comfortable narrative that made people feel good. The real, raw, painful truth about infidelity in marriage, domestic violence, financial abuse, and the courage required to fight back. "They poured boiling water on me," she said, showing the scars still visible on her arm. "They tried to steal my business, my reputation, my freedom, and my daughter's life. They had money, power, and connections. All I had was the truth. And somehow, that was enough." The congregation erupted in applause. Many were crying. Women came forward afterward, sharing their own stories of cheating spouses, emotional manipulation, and the fear that kept them trapped. Chidera listened to each one, took their numbers, promised help through the Chiamaka Foundation. But the most significant moment came when a young woman approached, maybe 23, with terror in her eyes. "My boyfriend says if I don't do what he wants, he'll hurt me. He says no one will believe me if I report him. He says his family's too powerful. I don't know what to do." Chidera took the young woman's hand, looked her directly in the eyes, and said what she wished someone had told her years ago. "Believe in your own power, document everything, build your case, find your allies, and when you're ready, fight back with everything you have, because you deserve better. Your life matters, and no amount of power protects someone forever. The truth always comes out. Always." The young woman nodded, tears flowing freely, and Chidera knew she'd found her purpose. This was why she'd survived. Not just for Chiamaka, though her daughter was the greatest gift, but for every woman who'd faced similar battles, who'd need to know that fighting back was possible, that justice existed even when the system seemed rigged against them. As she drove home that evening, Chiamaka cooing in the back seat, Chidera passed the apartment building in Victoria Island, where her nightmare had begun. The luxury apartment she'd once shared with Chukwudi. She didn't feel anger looking at it anymore. Just relief. Gratitude even. Because that moment in the kitchen, as horrific as it had freed her from a life built on lies and a man who'd never deserved her love. Her phone buzzed. A message from Commander Okoli. "Heard your speech. Chiamaka's lucky to have you as her mother. We're lucky you didn't stay silent." Chidera smiled, typed back, "Thank you for standing with me. You gave me the courage to finish what I started." "No," he replied. "You had that courage all along. You just needed the right battle to show it." Maybe he was right. Maybe the strength had always been there, dormant, waiting for the moment when survival demanded she become someone new. Someone who wouldn't accept betrayal silently. Someone who understood that sometimes the only way through hell was to burn everything down and rebuild from the ashes. Chiamaka gurgled from her car seat, and Chidera glanced back at her daughter through the rearview mirror. Those tiny eyes, so like her own, were wide and alert, taking in the Lagos skyline as evening traffic crawled around them. "Your father tried to destroy us," Chidera whispered, "but instead he gave us freedom. He gave us purpose. And someday, when you're old enough to understand, I'll tell you this story. Not to make you hate him, but to teach you that you're never as powerless as someone wants you to believe. That co-parenting conflict, public disgrace, financial revenge, none of it matters as much as knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone take that away. The sun set over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and Chidera drove home to her small but peaceful apartment in Ikeja, where she and her daughter would build a new life. Not the fairy tale she'd once imagined. Something better, something real, something earned through fire and pain, and the kind of courage that only comes when everything else has been stripped away. She'd survived domestic betrayal. She'd defeated a cheating spouse and his predatory mistress. She'd exposed corruption, protected her child, and transformed her trauma into a movement that would help thousands of other women. The revenge story was over. The healing story was just beginning, and Chidera was ready for whatever came next. Thank you for watching this incredible journey. If this story touched you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more powerful African tales. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible, that justice exists, and that no one is ever as powerless as they feel in their darkest moment. What was your favorite part of Chidera's story? Comment below and let's discuss. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in second chances and the power of women supporting women. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your voice matters, and you are stronger than you know. Stay blessed.